So let's get started. I actually would like to get to know the audience a bit better as well. So just to make sure that everybody is awake, who here in the room currently is a software developer? Just raise your hand. Good, that's most of you. And who in the room is like a senior software developer? So maybe you have like 10 years of experience. Still a lot, that's good, that's good. And then final question, who of you guys are currently working as a technical lead? So you have a couple of developers that are working in your team. That's a bit less. And have you ever worked with other technical leads? It's different people than the first question. That's really interesting. Now, if I'm going to give tips on technical leadership, I should probably start with an explanation what I think that technical leadership is. So I believe that a technical lead has the responsibility to help a team move forwards. So in general, the person who is assigned as a technical lead has a sound technical experience and also strong communication skills. He or she will probably be accountable for the technical direction of the project, and he will also be the go-to person for other stakeholders like your business, like your project management, etc. Let's dive into some details. First and foremost, the technical guidance is very important. When it comes to medium or larger teams, it's not uncommon that you have a dedicated technical lead who will be taking responsibility for certain leadership activities like guiding the technical vision. So for example, which technology are we going to use? How are we going to deploy our project? What are the architectural patterns that we will use, etc. Next is analyzing risk and requirements. So another example, imagine that the new version of a framework came out, or you discover something new here at the conference and say, oh, we really need to use this. This is like the best thing that I've ever saw. Which are the risks if you go implementing those new technologies within your existing application? And how can you, of course, mitigate these risks? It's also about coaching. I hope most of you don't have to deal with boxers. But it makes a lot of sense in projects that you have like a mixed audience. You will have junior developers, you will have senior developments, and it makes a lot of sense because it's more cost effective. You will train the junior developers, so there's also a very important coaching role for the technical leads. And then finally, it is about bridging the communication gap. I mean, most of us here in the room, we have a pretty technical background. You just showed me that earlier. And business stakeholders, they're less technical in nature. So you will need to find a way to communicate with these less technical people. So, do we really need a technical lead? What do you guys think? Do we need a technical lead? Raise your hand if you think that we really need a technical lead. That's actually like 70%, I think. There's actually like a lot of discussion on technical leads on the internet. If you just Google it, you will come up with tons of links, and many of these links have actually pretty interesting points. In like the ideal world where you have a team of well-functioning developers that can make right decisions, that can prioritize their work, maybe it's not strictly necessary to have a technical lead. I've never seen the ideal world before. So do we really need a technical lead? Everything is awesome. If you have seen the Lego movie, you will actually know that everything is not always that awesome. So even if you have a context where everybody talks to each other and you can make decisions, it is very easy to disrupt that delicate balance. Everybody has seen these kind of discussions, right? And even if you have a really well-functioning team, the business will still be looking for like a single point of contact, somebody that they can put their requirements and just have somebody else handle it. But I think it's important that the technical lead role is just a role. It's not important to discuss whether you need one or not. I think it's more important to make sure that the job of the technical lead is fulfilled, the responsibilities that he or she has. Now, as the job title states, there are two sides to the story. There's the technical side of the story, and there's also the leadership part of the story. And unlike my diagram, these will never be balanced like equally on each side. I hope to provide some tips for both of these. And we're going to start with the technical part. But just one warning, like any leadership function, a bad technical lead can make things worse. So with these tips, I hope to prevent that. So the first tip is be an advocate for change. So that means that you create like an atmosphere, a culture of positive evolution. So when you notice that a certain process is slow or cumbersome, or maybe it's just stupid. If you have ever worked for like a large corporation, you have seen stupid. I'm pretty sure that you have. You should embrace that. You should see that and you will try to make it better. Now, that's pretty easy to say, but how can we do this? How can we advocate for change? And one way that I particularly like is a pattern called OODA. It's called Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. Actually also called the Deming cycle. Now, what does this mean? In the observation phase, you will be looking at, from within the project, what's happening in the projects. For example, you have tests that, like, sometimes they fail. Then run the test again and they don't fail anymore. Or builds that sometimes fail. That's like, it's an annoyance. In the orientation phase, you will use your experience or the experience of your teammates to look at that particular problem. Why are these tests sometimes failing? It might be race conditions, things like that. So when you have identified the cause of the observations that you made, you should decide on how you're going to solve these. Maybe you need to appoint someone specific to look at, okay, this is the errors that are being caused by the build. You will look into that. And that also might be the technical lead, of course. And then if you made that decision, of course, you need to act upon it. And what's really cool about the Deming cycle is that it's a re-entrant loop. So if you do certain actions, it is perfectly possible that it leads to new observations. So maybe the test that was failing in the past doesn't fail anymore, but all of the other tests are failing. So then you should probably have taken a different decision. How can you achieve this? By experiencing the same pain as everybody within the team. A technical lead should be part of the team. It's not somebody that comes from outside and just looks at the problem maybe once a week. You should be in the team and experience everything that everybody else is experiencing. And I personally am a big fan of this continuous evolution. And continuous evolution also means like changing the name of your presentation when you have already started. So welcome, good morning to my talk called 11 Tips to Become an Awesome Technical Lead. So the second one is work through failure and success. Things will fail. You need to prepare for failure. Builds will break, null pointers will happen. It will happen. But when these happen, don't finger point. Just look for the solution and take ownership, stay accountable for what you're doing. And also learn from this failure. Something that I always try to tell the people I'm working with, don't fix the same bug twice. You need to have unit tests or integration tests to make sure that whatever caused your application to go in a state of failure, that doesn't happen again. Now, if we say that things will fail, it's also very important to celebrate successes. And I will share a personal story about celebrating success, because I think that you should celebrate success often and early. So if you have finished a sprint or a feature is complete, then maybe do something fun with the team, like happy hour, drinks, team building, things like that, because the team will be very motivated and it's just plain fun. Now, the personal story, a couple of months ago, I was working on a project in Belgium for a customer, and we finished the project. We were in time, surprisingly, because that does not happen very often. And we do a demo to the customer, and the customer looks at what we're doing, and he's really happy. But after the demo, he told us, well, management has decided that they're going to a completely different route. So the project never made it to production. And if that's the particular moment in time that you're waiting for to celebrate, well, that's like really not very, very fun. That's really disappointing, especially since the team who did most of the work worked very hard in making sure that it was a successful project. So congratulate the team when a sprint is successful, but also congratulate individuals. So you've been at the conference for 2 days already. You've seen a lot of cool things. When you go back to the project that you're working on, and you say, this new feature, maybe we should try to implement it, has added value for us. If that idea, if it delivers, then you should also be congratulating the individual person, because it will lead to more creativity, it will lead to innovative ideas. Stay technical. I think this is a very important tip, since there will be a lot of responsibilities and things that you need to do. So a technical lead has non-coding responsibilities, but I believe that you should still keep on writing code. You should do code reviews. You should have your code reviewed as well, of course. And I believe that it will probably be the case that you will have less time to write code than other people in the team. But that doesn't mean that you should not be doing like proof of concepts. Maybe look at what can be reused, identify interfaces that might be useful to split off, etc. I already talked about code reviews. And I also think it's very important that a technical vision for your project exists. And this technical vision needs to be shared by the team. If it's only in your head, then it's not really very useful. But I also believe it really works if you share how you got to that technical vision with the team and maybe try to encourage them to work together with you on the technical vision. The adoption will become a lot easier. And then the last part is also the evolution of the code. At a certain moment in time, you will get like a lot of confidence in the team. You will trust their decisions, but that doesn't mean that you need to be looking at the constant evolution of the code, because there will be other opportunities arising from looking at the code. And now, in general, most developers, they're pretty keen on looking at frameworks or new versions of things, or new ways of working, doing microservices, doing gRPC. But these topics like networking, security, deployment, and consistency of the code base, they're a lot less like sexy topics. Yeah, well, networking, somebody else will probably figure it out. So also pay a lot of attention to these points. And I sometimes find it kind of strange that so many people don't really are like obsessed with deployment. I mean, we're building distributed systems. I had tons of microservices talk in here. Yet the deployment stops whenever it's running in Docker on my machine. That's absolutely not true. It's worthless if it doesn't go to production. Tip number 4, always available. This is actually a pretty difficult tip. I believe that as a technical lead, you should try to be always available for your team, for questions, for remarks, for guidance, for assistance, and things like that. But since you also have other responsibilities, this is basically about time management. And what I tend to do and what works for me is I have 4 charts: technical design, business, project management, and code. And I try to assign a value, a percentage of my time that I want to be spending on these topics. Now, you do this up front before you start with the project, and most of the time it looks like this with me. But when the project is ongoing, you should also like fill in what is the actual amount of time that you're spending, because that's something that you will learn from. If you're doing project management all of the time, then you're not doing the other things. You're not talking to your business. Now, that doesn't necessarily need to be a problem if you have a strong team, if the other roles are fulfilled, but I think very important that you know about these. Be realistic. You don't need to be able to answer every question ad hoc. Sometimes it's just okay saying, okay, that's a really good question. I want to take some time and look into that. Maybe look at alternatives. This also really works really nicely with the OODA. But what is very important is that you come back to the initial person who asked you the question. It's just a sign of respect, a sign of showing, okay, you came to me with this problem, this is what I've thought, maybe we can work on it together. And also be very aware of your team. Other people might have faced a similar problem, so you just might need to be connecting people. This is especially true when you're working with larger teams. And this time management, it's not easy, but believe me, over time you will get better in it. Be a mentor for your team. I have a couple of sub-responsibilities for mentoring. So the first one is the mediator role. You should facilitate discussion. And also bear in mind that when people disagree with you or disagree with each other, that's actually a good thing. Because it means that they're passionate enough about the project, about what they're doing, to come to a good solution. So try to make sure that everybody in the team can participate in the discussion and that the decision is formed at the end. Unfortunately, if there's like no way of coming to an agreement, then maybe you should park the problem, and if you need to make a decision, then you are accountable to take that decision. The next one is mentoring. Like I said earlier, be a teacher. I personally do this in the same fashion all the time. At the beginning of a project or when new people arrive at the project, I will virtually review every commit that they do. I will write tests that make their code fail. This will not make you very popular, but when you explain to these people why that you're doing this and the reason that it should be changed, they will adopt it. They will say, oh, okay, but it makes a lot of sense because this situation, it's a real situation. It's not some isolated thing that will never happen. And people will start picking that up. And then you buy yourself some more time to spend time on other things. Effective delegation, you do not need to do everything yourself. It will become easy to identify who are like the people who are more strong when it comes to database related things or when it comes to queuing, and you just delegate to these people if you have these kind of problems. So do not try to own all the responsibilities. Just make sure that these responsibilities are taken by someone. Matching goals. Every individual developer, every junior developer, they have certain goals. Maybe they want to become a technical lead, or maybe they want to do something related to certain new technology. And you should what I call specifically targeted dynamic coaching. So specifically targeted means it is for the individual. What does he or she wants to do? And dynamic it means because it will change. I'm pretty sure that when you leave the conference here, there will be things that you say, oh, I absolutely want to learn akka or whatever. So communication is always very important, but even for matching goals, it becomes more important because it shows that you value the people in your team. And last but not least, optimize for the group. You're working on a project as a team. It is important that you spend a lot of time with the individual, try to make sure that he or she feels happy, but in the end, it is about building a project, it's about the group. So, and I know this is going to sound a bit corny, but when the team is working good, when the team is happy, then all the developers will be happy as well. So, summarize, know when to give input, know when to make decisions, but also important, know when to take a step back. Surround yourself with other technical leads. I was asking the question at the beginning of the talk if you have ever worked with other technical leads, and this is surprisingly that there's more people who are a technical lead, but they have never worked with other technical leads. And actually I think that is very valuable if you start surrounding yourself with other technical leads within your company, within your project, within your customer. I mean, just surround yourself with these people and look at how they're doing things. So what are they spending time on? How do they do their time management? How do they give feedback or input when something happens without coming across as very dominant, because we don't want to come across as very dominant, well, most of the time. But listen to them and learn from them. Don't just blindly adopt whatever they're saying, because every project is different, every team is different, but I think it's very interesting to learn from each other. This is on a personal level, but there's also the organizational level. Are there any grand objectives within the customer that you're working for? Is there a clearly overarching objective of the software that you're building? Maybe there's an architecture that you want the different teams to be working on together. And also interoperability and dependencies. And dependencies is also a very important one, because there is dependencies on resources, the server needs to be available, but there's also dependencies on teams. So imagine that you're requested to do something like two-way SSL, but you have no idea how security works, but that other guy, Tim from the other project, he's just the guy. You give him 1 day and it will be implemented. So you have a dependency on other teams. And dependency on other projects is also possible. That's something that I have experienced earlier this month. There was a project that went to production, and they have a dependency on us. We have actually 0 production environments, so that is kind of an issue. You are not alone. For technical leads, it is very important to develop sound networking skills as well. So when you see somebody struggling with a certain problem, go to them, speak up to them, try to come to a solution together, even if that particular person is not even working within your company or within your customer. This is really valuable if you can help each other. Okay, leadership. These are the less technical tips. And one thing that I value a lot is interviewing new people. And you can interview new people to work on the project that you're working on, but you can also interview new people to work at the company. And those are different kind of interviews. And interviewing the right people and hiring them, that can be very rewarding. But unfortunately, you will also get it wrong sometimes. So I have an interesting video about this, although I appear to have closed it. That's over there.
So, you want your job? What are you do? Me and the half man hunter. Me all together. You hunt together. Did they many men? So, they were here, sorry. Take your most time. Hunter? Maybe get it? Why you leave that truck?
That's smart, Dad. Me raise a temper bigger.
How long you with that truck?
10 months?
10 months? Me hear you leave after 2 months. Me hear you leave and go travel around playing with friends.
Me too.
Me don't try to chase for them.
Me just want to plan. Me guys just system. Yeah. Lovely. Little. Little. Going to land there, Peter.
So, have you ever been in a situation where you need to interview like 10 people in not that much time? It is not very pleasant. So I'd like to give some tips on how you can make sure that you hire the correct people. It's know your goal. I mean, prepare for the interview. I really hate it when someone from human resources come up. So, oh, do you have 5 minutes? We have an interview. Absolutely not. I have no 5 minutes for an interview. What are you trying to achieve? Are you looking for somebody who will join the company for a longer time? Or are you looking for somebody who's just going to increase the bandwidth of the project that you're working on right now? Now, for the people who've read the Mythical Man Month by Fred Brooks, you know that 2 women will not be able to deliver a baby in less than 9 months. So be very realistic when you're doing interviews. And also, I think resumes are interesting as well, but you should be worried about what's useful about resumes. You should try to look for patterns. So, for example, does the person that you're interviewing, does he normally do a project for a long time? Maybe like shorter assignments? I mean, both are possible and both are good as well, but when you're looking for something in particular, and you know that because you have prepared for it, then you know if there's going to be a mix and match, if it's going to be something that you can offer to the people, and you should just be upfront and talk about it. I mean, we're looking for somebody for like 3 months. We don't have more time than 3 months. You like to do projects that last for 2 years. We cannot offer you that. Then you have a very honest discussion. I don't really think that you should be focusing a lot on tooling, especially when you're looking for somebody for the longer term. I think it's more important that you try to identify if the person in front of you has like the mindset of a developer. Will he address problems logically? Will he start talking about the latest Spring framework or the latest release of Akka, or will he be looking at the problem at hand? Again, this really depends on your goal. If you're just looking for somebody to increase the bandwidth, to go faster, then the tooling becomes more important than when you're looking for somebody for the longer term. And I also really care about the eagerness to learn, because new tools will appear, new frameworks, new libraries. We are in a really evolving profession. Very important, do not use Stack Overflow to find questions. You should try to do this, actually. If you look at Stack Overflow, you look at questions for senior developers, that makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, if you're not implementing bubble sort every other day, then don't ask people to draw bubble sort on a whiteboard. US Customs do this, but it makes 0 sense. Just look at that problem that you're facing within your project. I mean, what are you trying to solve? And it's very easy to say what you should not be doing, but I actually have a pattern, if this thing works, on how to do technical interviews. I always start by comforting the person who is taking the interview, because in general people will get a bit nervous. They are a new company, they see new people, they're there for a job opportunity, so they will get a bit nervous. And comforting, I do this by asking like very simple questions to start with. So one question that I always ask, and some people in the room will be able to verify that it's true, is explain to me what is the difference between an abstract class and an interface. Now, this is a very simple question. Everybody should have some idea on how to explain this, but it's really surprising if you notice how people are sometimes having trouble to cope with that question. And that's why the second tip is very important. It's about offering options. So some people like to draw on a whiteboard. Some people like to give a theoretical explanation. Other people just want to implement something. So when you prepare for an interview, make sure that you have a whiteboard available, maybe have a laptop available, so that you can comfort them and aid them in their way of responding to your questions, because there is no wrong or right way. when they do a good job, you should also be building on their response, on their experience, because like that, you can go to more difficult questions, again, focused on the problem that you are trying to solve within your project, and show interest, show a genuine interest in people, because it will make them feel at ease, it will make them loosen up, and they will give you a lot more, and then you can make sure, okay, this really is the guy or the girl for our problem. And what I always like to do is ask like a bonus question. So, what happened during your project that was really, really, really complicated? It took you like weeks to be able to solve them, and also tell them this up front. It's like, it's okay if you're not able to answer this question. I mean, we weren't able. It took us a lot of time. And if you have somebody who comes up to the team and just like can immediately answer your question, you know this is like a match made in heaven. Tip number 8: embrace cultural differences. So I was really curious to see how that's going to show up. That little green dot to the left, that's Belgium, that's where I live. And the bigger green dot is Poland. And if you see the entire world, it's still a very small part of the world. What am I trying to say about that? Is all people are different. We all go home to live different lives. Some people are married, some people are not, some people have kids, some people don't. And this is something that you should really try to embrace, because your users, your customers, they're not like the geeky developers that you're working with every day. All your users are different as well. So this is really, really valuable. And opinions matter. When people have different opinions, I touched on this briefly before, that's really good. Discussions are good, because it means that they're putting their energy in discussing with you and looking for alternatives. So really try to embrace this, especially with all these different kind of mindsets that people might have. Very important. Because in the end, we're all working towards the same end goal, which is a working system. This is not about egos, this is about the working system and having a good time in what we're doing. So try to keep in mind that you have a shared end goal, and try to surround yourself with passionate people. Try to surround yourself with the people who have like the developer mindset, and that really brings a lot of value to the project. I'm very curious what your response to this will be. If you have worked with offshore, you're going to notice that it might sometimes become more difficult. There's like the time limitation. If you work with somebody who is in a completely different continent, it might be that when you're working, he's sleeping or she's sleeping, or vice versa. And that can be a positive thing, because work will get done while you're sleeping. I mean, that's like a really good thing, right? But on the other hand, it will make communication a lot harder. If you're in that particular situation, I think that maybe sometimes as a team you should take the night shift, and also vice versa, because then you will show the respect to them, saying, okay, we can work on it better together. You will create some kind of bond. And you know, in the end, developers are people who work best at night anyway, so this is a good way of communicating. And communication is really key, because some words have different meanings in different areas of the world. So if you just look at the word yes, it means something completely different in Europe or for example, in India. And that's actually something that you can cope with as well. You just say, what are you saying yes to? So, yes, I understand that interface needs to be whatever. So make sure that you make the communication clear. And one thing that also really works is just instant messaging. It is a lot easier if you have a chat room for your project and just can ask questions over there. It's easier than to pick up the telephone at that small particular amount of time that you're both awake. So just have a message room, use it like that. Integrate it with your CI/CD, integrate it with your ticketing system and things like that. It also is a benefit of that is that when there are more people in the room, it's easier to help each other as well. So definitely something that you should need. This, of course, it also works for onshore. I think most people right now are using some kind of instant messaging really specific for project. Maybe that's an interesting question. Who here in the room is not using instant messaging in their day-to-day work? Awesome. I will skip this from the slides next time. So the next thing that I want to talk about is preparing work. Because in general, when you work with offshore developers, they will not have the opportunity to talk directly to the customer. So you should maybe do like a technical design or make sure that the user stories that you've created are very clear, because it will be their main point of communication with your project, with the work that they need to be doing. And then the last one is very important. Everybody is part of the team. I've worked with project managers who really see offshore development as like cheap labor, and I really hated that. Actually, a personal story, I've worked in Belgium with like a group of Polish developers, and some of these guys were, up until this day, one of the best that I've ever worked with. So everybody is the same, everybody should be a part of the team, but this goes all the way, so don't make sure that this is not the only takeaway that you get from my talk, but you can also be pretty angry at somebody over instant messaging. So everybody really should be part of it. Estimating. I'd like to start with a quote by Douglas Hofstadter saying, Hofstadter's law, it always takes longer than you expect, even when you take into account Hofstadter's law. Estimating is hard. When you do it more often, you will get better at it, but just like with interviews, you will still get it wrong from time to time. Mastering estimation is really like a lifelong journey. But this is also something that will like set you apart. This is something that people in general or stakeholders in general associate with like professionalism if you can make the estimation really good. There are a couple of ways of doing this. So one that is called planning poker. So if you're working in an agile or Scrum or Kanban or whatever way of working, planning poker is used very often, and within planning poker you first need to define a sequence, and you get some playing cards like you see on the image, and each point of the card represent like an estimation of what you're trying to achieve. So there's like somebody who is explaining the user story, somebody is saying, okay, I'm going to count down 1, 2, 3, and then you play your cards, and if everybody in the room plays something very similar, then you can be quite confident that the estimation will be good enough. But when people are playing something very different, okay, then you have identified a potential problem. That's good as well. And then you should like do replaying and allow people to be reasoned. So maybe the database specialist knows that this like data model from hell. I know you just want to do CRUD on that particular table, but you need to have 10 views and this data model from hell. And then you can play again, and you will see that eventually the estimations will like come together nicely. And this uncertainty is normal. When you are integrating, for example, a third-party service and their documentation is really bad and you actually have no real clue, you don't even know whether it's a REST or SOAP or something else, then you will need to play higher cards because there's this uncertainty. And there's two ways of coping with uncertainty. So the first way is you delay what you're doing and look at like doing more technical design, looking out what is the protocol that they're using, what is the communication mechanism, what kind of messages do they expect. But it might be something that's really a priority. Business wants it right away, and then business needs to accept this uncertainty. And if you communicate about this very openly, they should listen to what you're saying. As a technical lead, you will probably also be doing something that I call solutioning. So that means doing estimations before the project actually starts. Or doing estimations for like a contract. When governments or banks want to do large projects, they in general submit a request for proposal, and then you need to send. Then customers can send their proposals to this to bank or government, and then you need to estimate what exactly it is that you're offering. And one way of doing this is with the above formula, where you do, it's called 3-tier estimates, where you do an optimistic estimation, you do a best guess estimation, and you do a pessimistic estimation, and then use that formula, then you have some like of weighted mean, and then it gives you in general a good idea of what you're doing. And it also gives you an idea of the certainty that you have. So if the difference between the optimistic and the pessimistic estimation is like huge, then you know, okay, this is a project where some risk is involved as well. Something else that is important are the unknown unknowns. Due to the nature of estimation, you're not doing something hands-on, so you are all the time facing unknowns, and there will also be unknowns that you have no clue that it was going to be a problem. So you will come across this, and I think it's very important that if you make certain assumptions, that you document your assumptions. Then nobody else will ever be able to tell you, oh, but you said it was going to be a week of work and it was 5 months. Yes, but please look at the assumptions, that I have done. And then add some time for testing, debugging, etc. Because you're working on a real project. When you do an estimation, you're estimating for the team, not the best possible, the shortest possible time that you personally can do the project in perfect conditions. Because first and foremost, perfect conditions don't exist. And you're not writing something for yourself. This is like realistic. This is somebody people will be paying for what you're doing. So just add a percentage for documentation, for like the I don't know if you can say fuck in Polish, so the what the fuck moments. I did it twice anyway. So, and also be sure that you know what your deliverables are. If your deliverable is also a documentation or a manual, then you should also factor these in within the estimations. So any estimation is better than no estimation. Even if it's completely off, or your peers really disagree with what you're saying, and it sparks some kind of discussion, that's already a good thing, because then you're working towards a better estimation. Don't forget the bigger picture. People are in general can make estimations easier when they're focusing on smaller parts of the problem, but never forget like the bigger picture. Sometimes just like a very high-level estimate can already be good enough to know if you want to go in a certain direction. I think this is pretty obvious. Share your estimates with your colleagues, with your business, with your stakeholders, so that they can give input on them as well. And if you want to become better at estimating, just also review your estimates. This is not the most pleasant work out there, but if you look at what you did before the project and after the project, then you can see where you made the mistakes and become better in the future. Interfacing with the outside world. Since we're nearing the end of the talk, I thought I should add a picture of kittens. That also always works. So most people here in the room, they're pretty have a sound technical background, but when you're working with business, they will not have that background, and that's a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. You should try to look for analogies for making sure that when you're communicating with them, that they can relate to what you're explaining. So maybe you use other terms to make sure that you're on the same page. And work very closely together with your business, because they will have requirements and they will not explicitly state what their requirements are, but you should always be looking for what they're trying to do. Always trying to make sure, oh, but he is talking about this and maybe wants to be that. It's like what the Japanese call like a Kaizen state of mind, that you're always looking for opportunities, always looking for information, and making sure that the evolution of the project goes very well. Be the go-to guy or go-to girl for management, the customer and other stakeholders. I don't think that you should be like the single point of contact for a project, because then when you will become a liability. But maybe be the first point of contact, because when you're working on something, when you're in the code, you're focused on one thing only, you really don't like the interruptions. But you should also try to make sure that in some discussions, some people of the team are integrated as well, and that is documented very, very nicely as well. Another personal story, I used to be working at government in Belgium, and I was working on a fairly easygoing project. We had a large code base with some really cool algorithms doing a lot of mathematical stuff, but it was we had a small user base, the customers were really happy with what we're doing. It's like not really a lot of stress, but it was a very large code base, and it was very mathematical. So at a given moment in time, I get the opportunity to start working for a different project for the same customer, for government, and this was like really like the fairy tale project. They had the best tools, they had the best people, they had really large budgets. So I applied for that function, and I was really happy because I got it. So I was like, oh yes, I'm going to work on the fairy tale project. And as it turns out, I was not allowed to go there, because there was nobody who could do the work I was doing on the previous project, which was again, this is a very, very annoying situation. So again, don't be the single point of contact, but maybe try to be the first point of contact. No. I was really aiming to have the slide with the least letters on it for the entire conference. I think I might have done that. No is the magical word. In general, people tend to think, or developers tend to think, yes, I can build that, yes, we can deliver, yes, we can do everything, and that's good, because it really shows that you're motivated, that you care, but as a technical lead, you're sometimes making decisions for the entire team, and no is something that you really should like try to say more often. When customer comes to you with unrealistic expectations and say, okay, no, we cannot do this. An example for when you look back at the estimation part, when a customer comes up to you and say, oh no, these estimates, no, I know a guy, and then my nephew, he can do PHP much faster than what you're trying to do. Make the estimate smaller, just say no. I'm being a professional, this is the amount of time that I believe that it's going to take. So if it's not realistic, just say no. Last tip, facilitate agile teamwork. So who here in the room is using some kind of agile way of working? So maybe Scrum or Kanban or... Who is not? Okay, that's good. Some people are still doing waterfall, and maybe that's not even a bad thing, or have no methodology, that's probably a bad thing. No, this is not a talk on agile, but I believe that when you facilitate agile as a technical lead, that your project will have more chance to be successful. So I think that you should create a backlog, and the backlog is like your garbage bin for everybody. The product owner, the team member, somebody who's just passing by, everybody should be able to add stuff to the backlog. And there's only one rule for the backlog: needs to make sure that it's a user story. It's from the user's point of view. It's not some technical requirements like resilience. That's not a backlog item. I mean, that's a nice word, but it's capability. Since your backlog is going to be your garbage bin, you also need to have a prioritized backlog. And in the prioritized backlog, the technical lead and the team, business, product owner, everybody sits together and start deciding, okay, we have a certain budget to do something, what will we be working on? When the backlog is prioritized, you can do a sprint planning together with your team and looking on who will be able to do what information is available. It's like the classic definition of having a definition of ready. Use burned out charts, do retrospectives. I'm standing on the cable. Because these are really these feedback loops. And again, this is not a talk on agile, but feedback loops, short development life cycles, they really will facilitate a lot of things. If you're not doing agile, just make sure that you facilitate an awesome team. We really have one of the coolest professions out there. You should just try to have some fun, give ownership, show trust, just make sure that you're having a good time. And that was all for me. Thank you. Do you have any questions? It's really difficult to see from here. Questions? No questions? Okay, thank you.